You walked across grass this morning, maybe yesterday. Maybe you stepped off a sidewalk and your shoe pressed into it for half a second, and you kept moving. You didn't think about it. Nobody thinks about it. But something was happening underneath that grass that would change the way you think about the ground you walk on if anyone ever bothered to explain the physics. And nobody does. The question is not whether you should touch grass. The question is what grass is actually doing to the air you breathe, to the ground beneath your feet, and to the 37 trillion cells inside your body the moment your skin makes contact with it. And the answer involves particle physics, electrical engineering, microbiology, and a 400 million year old evolutionary arms race that is still being fought right now in every lawn, every field, every meadow on this planet. Before I get into this, if you're the kind of person who wants to understand how things actually work, not the simplified version, not the wellness blog version, the real physics, subscribe to this channel right now, because that is exactly what we do here. Let me start with something you have never been told about the ground. You think of soil as dirt, dead material, a brown substance that gets under your fingernails and stains your clothes. That is like calling the ocean a puddle. 1 gram of healthy soil, a pinch you could hold between 2 fingers, contains approximately 1 billion bacteria. Not a million, a billion in a single gram. It contains up to 200 meters of fungal hyphae, thread-like structures, thinner than a spider's silk, weaving through every particle of that gram like a nervous system through flesh. It contains tens of thousands of protozoa, thousands of nematodes, hundreds of microarthropods. A single teaspoon of soil beneath a grass field contains more living organisms than there are human beings on the entire planet. You are not walking on dirt. You are walking on the most densely populated ecosystem per unit volume anywhere on Earth, including the ocean, including tropical rainforests, including coral reefs. Nothing comes close. And the grass growing out of it is not passive. It is not decoration. It is a chemical factory running 24 hours a day. And what it manufactures will change your blood chemistry in under 30 minutes. Let me show you how. And if you've ever wondered why being outside just feels different from being inside, drop a comment right now. Tell me what you think it is. Because I promise you, it is not what you think. Your body is electrical. Not metaphorically, electrically. Every signal your brain sends to your muscles, every heartbeat, every firing neuron is an electrical impulse. Ion channels in your cell membranes open and close, allowing charged particles, sodium, potassium, calcium, chloride, to flow in and out, generating voltage differentials across the membrane. Your resting cell membrane potential sits at roughly -70 millivolts. That is a measurable electrical charge. Your heart generates an electrical field strong enough to be detected by electrodes on the surface of your skin. That is what an electrocardiogram measures. Not chemistry, electricity. Now here's what nobody explains. The surface of the Earth carries a net negative electrical charge. This is not speculation. It is measured, quantified, and maintained by a global electrical circuit powered by approximately 2,000 thunderstorms occurring simultaneously around the planet at any given moment. Lightning drives electrons into the ground. The fair weather return current flows upward through the atmosphere. The system is continuous. The Earth's surface sits at roughly -400,000 volts relative to the ionosphere, and the ground beneath the grass you're walking on is part of this circuit. Modern life has disconnected you from it. Rubber-soled shoes, synthetic flooring, concrete, asphalt. You spend your entire day insulated from the electrical surface of the planet you evolved on. Your ancestors walked barefoot on earth and grass for 200,000 years. You have been insulated from it for roughly 50. That is 0.025% of human history spent disconnected from a planetary electrical system your physiology was built to interact with. In 2004, a study published in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine by Gaetan Chevalier and colleagues measured what happens to human blood when the body is electrically reconnected to the Earth's surface. They used grounding patches on the soles of subjects' feet and the palms of their hands, creating a conductive pathway between the body and the ground. Then they drew blood, and they looked at it under dark field microscopy. Before grounding, the red blood cells were clumped, aggregated, stacked together in formations called rouleaux, like coins in a roll. This is common. It increases blood viscosity. It makes the heart work harder to push blood through capillaries. It reduces the surface area available for oxygen exchange. After 40 minutes of grounding, the same blood looked different. The cells had separated. They were repelling each other, spreading apart, moving freely. The researchers measured the zeta potential on the red blood cell surfaces, the electrical charge that determines how strongly cells push away from one another. Zeta potential had increased significantly. The cells were more negatively charged. They were repelling harder. Blood was thinner, flowing more easily, carrying oxygen more efficiently. 40 minutes. Not medication, not exercise, electrical contact with the ground, through the skin. If this is already changing how you think about something as simple as walking barefoot, hit the like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Seriously, this information should not be rare. Now, I need to explain why grass specifically matters here, because this is not just about the ground. The grass itself is doing something. Grass is a monocot, a flowering plant with a single seed leaf, parallel veined leaves, and a fibrous root system that spreads laterally through the top layers of soil rather than driving a single taproot deep down. This architecture matters. A mature lawn grass plant, like Kentucky bluegrass, Poa pratensis, produces a root system that extends 4 to 6 inches deep and fans outward, interweaving with the roots of every neighboring plant. 1 square meter of healthy grass lawn contains approximately 850,000 individual grass plants. Their root systems are so entangled, so interlocked, that what you see as a lawn is structurally closer to a single, continuous organism than a collection of individuals. And every one of those 850,000 plants is performing gas exchange with the atmosphere above it and chemical exchange with the microbial community below it, simultaneously. Here's the specific chemistry. Grass performs C3 or C4 photosynthesis, depending on the species, pulling carbon dioxide from the atmosphere through stomata on its blade surfaces. Exactly the same mechanism I described in my video about trees. If you haven't seen that one, go watch it after this. But grass does something trees do not do at scale. Grass turns over. It grows, dies, and regrows on a cycle measured in weeks, not decades. A single grass blade lives for roughly 40 to 60 days before it dies, falls, and is decomposed by the soil microbiome. This rapid turnover means grass is constantly feeding carbon into the soil. Constantly. A healthy grassland sequesters between 0.5 and 2 tons of carbon per acre per year, and most of that carbon goes down, not up, into the roots, into the soil, into the fungal networks, into the microbial biomass that converts it into stable organic compounds called humus that can persist in the soil for centuries. Subscribe if you did not know that. Subscribe if you thought grass was just green filler between the sidewalk and the street. Because what I am about to tell you about what happens when your bare skin contacts this system is going to restructure everything you thought you knew about your own immune system. When you walk barefoot on grass, 3 things happen at once. First, grounding. We covered this. Electron transfer from the Earth's negatively charged surface through the conductive moisture in the grass and soil into your body, through the skin on the soles of your feet. Your feet have approximately 200,000 nerve endings and a high density of sweat glands, making them one of the most electrically conductive surfaces on your body. The moisture on grass, dew, recent rain, even ambient humidity acts as an electrolyte bridge, improving conductivity between your skin and the ground. Electrons flow, zeta potential increases, blood viscosity decreases. This begins within minutes. Second, microbial exposure. And this is where it gets interesting. Comment below if you have ever heard of the hygiene hypothesis or the old friends hypothesis. Or if those words mean nothing to you, comment that too. Because what I am about to explain is one of the most important ideas in modern immunology, and almost nobody outside of research medicine has heard it explained properly. In 1989, an epidemiologist named David Strachan published a paper that changed immunology. He had been studying hay fever rates in British families, and he noticed something strange. Children who grew up in larger families, specifically children who had more older siblings, had significantly lower rates of hay fever and eczema. More siblings meant more infections passed around in childhood. More infections meant more microbial exposure early in life. And more microbial exposure correlated with lower rates of allergic disease later. Strachan proposed what became known as the hygiene hypothesis. The idea, simplified, is that a lack of microbial exposure in early childhood leads to an immune system that has not been properly calibrated. An immune system that overreacts to harmless substances, pollen, dust mites, pet dander, because it never learned to distinguish threat from background noise. But the hypothesis has evolved. Graham Rook, a professor of medical microbiology at University College London, refined it into what he calls the old friends hypothesis. And the argument is more specific and more powerful. It is not just that we need infections. It is that we need exposure to the specific microorganisms that co-evolved with us over hundreds of thousands of years. Soil bacteria, environmental mycobacteria, organisms that live in dirt, in water, on plants, in the guts of animals. Organisms that were a constant presence in the human environment for our entire evolutionary history, until we moved indoors, paved the ground, and sterilized everything. One organism in particular has become the focus of remarkable research: Mycobacterium vaccae, a species of soil bacterium found in, among other places, grass and the dirt beneath it. In 2007, Christopher Lowry at the University of Bristol published a study that made neuroscientists pay attention. He injected mice with heat, killed Mycobacterium vaccae. Dead bacteria, no infection, just the molecular signature of the organism. Then he measured serotonin levels in specific regions of the brain. Serotonin increased, not everywhere. In specific clusters of serotonin-producing neurons in the dorsal raphe nucleus, a brain region directly involved in mood regulation and anxiety, and the mice showed reduced anxiety-related behavior in standard behavioral tests. Dead soil bacteria, introduced to the body, altered brain chemistry. Lowry's team followed up. In 2019, they identified the specific molecule, a lipid called 10-zet hexadecanoic acid found in the cell wall of Mycobacterium vaccae. This single molecule, when it interacts with immune cells inside the body, inhibits a specific inflammatory pathway. It calms the immune response. And because the immune system and the nervous system are in constant biochemical communication, calming one calms the other. You are walking barefoot on grass. Your skin is in contact with soil. Mycobacterium vaccae is in that soil. Its molecular components are entering through microabrasions in your skin, through the mucous membranes if you touch your face, through inhalation of soil particles disturbed by your footsteps, and these molecules are interacting with your immune cells and downstream with the serotonin system in your brain. Not a metaphor, not a wellness claim, published, peer-reviewed, molecular immunology. Like and share this video right now. Not for me. Because someone you know is spending money on things that a walk in the grass might partially replace, and they deserve to hear the science. Now let me tell you about the third thing that happens when your feet hit the grass. And this one is the one that will keep you thinking tonight. If you're enjoying the value so far, please subscribe. Because what I am about to describe involves the air directly above a grass field, and what it is doing to your lungs every second you stand in it. And I have not even started on what happens to your cortisol, your sleep architecture, your inflammatory markers, or why a 2023 meta-analysis found that 20 minutes of barefoot ground contact produced statistically significant reductions in white blood cell count. We are just getting started. The air above a grass field is not the same as the air above a parking lot. And I do not mean that in some vague poetic sense. I mean, it is measurably, chemically, physically different in ways that have direct consequences for your respiratory system, your endocrine system, and your central nervous system. Let me show you the physics. Grass, like trees, releases volatile organic compounds into the atmosphere. You have smelled this. Everyone has. The smell of freshly cut grass is one of the most universally recognized scents on the planet. But you have never been told what that smell actually is. When a grass blade is damaged by a lawnmower, by an insect, by your foot pressing down on it, the plant releases a class of molecules called green leaf volatiles, GLVs. These are 6-carbon aldehydes and alcohols, specifically cis-3-hexanol, trans-2-hexanol, and cis-3-hexanol, produced by the enzymatic breakdown of fatty acids in the damaged cell membranes. The plant's cell wall ruptures. Enzymes called lipoxygenases attack the linolenic acid in the membrane. The fatty acid chain is cleaved, and the fragments are light enough and volatile enough to enter the gas phase immediately. That smell is a wound response. It is the chemical scream of damaged tissue, and your brain is wired to respond to it. In 2010, a research team at the University of Queensland, led by Nick Lavidas, published findings on the neurological effects of one specific green leaf volatile, cis-3-hexanol. They found that this molecule, when inhaled, modulated activity in the amygdala and the hypothalamus, two brain regions directly responsible for stress response and emotional regulation. The compound did not sedate. It did not stimulate. It modulated. It altered the gain on the stress circuit. And the researchers proposed a mechanism that most people never hear about. Olfactory receptor neurons in your nasal epithelium are not like other sensory cells. They are the only neurons in your body that are directly exposed to the external environment and directly connected to the brain without an intermediate synapse through the thalamus. Smell is the only sense that bypasses the brain's central relay station. Every other sense, vision, hearing, touch, taste, goes through the thalamus first. Olfactory signals go straight to the limbic system, the amygdala, the hippocampus, the structures that govern emotion and memory. So when you inhale green leaf volatiles from grass, the molecules bind to olfactory receptors, and the signal reaches your emotional brain before your conscious brain has any idea what just happened. Comment right now if you have ever noticed that being outside just shifts something in your mood and you could never explain why. This is why. Molecular signaling from damaged plant tissue entering your limbic system through a sensory pathway that bypasses conscious processing entirely. But green leaf volatiles are only part of what grass puts into the air. Undamaged grass that is just sitting there growing, releases isoprene, a 5-carbon molecule, C5H8, produced in the chloroplasts during photosynthesis and emitted through the stomata continuously during daylight hours. Grasslands are one of the largest sources of isoprene emission on Earth. Globally, vegetation releases roughly 600 million tons of isoprene per year, and grasses contribute a substantial fraction of that total. Now, isoprene does something in the atmosphere that matters for your lungs. It reacts with hydroxyl radicals, the atmosphere's primary cleaning agent, and with ozone. In the boundary layer, the first 1 to 2 kilometers of atmosphere above the surface, isoprene chemistry modulates local ozone concentrations. In rural and suburban grassland environments, this modulation tends to reduce ground-level ozone, the form of ozone that irritates airways and triggers inflammatory responses in lung tissue. The air above a grass field during active photosynthesis on a sunny day is measurably lower in ground-level ozone than the air above bare pavement or concrete at the same location. So you are standing on grass. The ground is transferring electrons into your body. Soil bacteria are interacting with your immune system. And the air you are breathing is chemically cleaner than the air 50 feet away over the parking lot. 3 systems operating simultaneously, none of which you can see, all of which are measurable. Subscribe right now if nobody has ever explained this to you before, because it gets deeper. Let me talk about cortisol. You know the word, stress hormone. But you probably don't know exactly what cortisol does, why it exists, or why the ground beneath your feet has a direct line to it. Cortisol is a glucocorticoid produced by the adrenal glands sitting on top of your kidneys. It is released in response to signals from the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, a cascade that begins in the brain and ends in the bloodstream. Cortisol is not a malfunction. It is essential. It mobilizes glucose. It suppresses non-essential systems during acute threat. It sharpens attention. In the short term, cortisol keeps you alive. In the long term, it destroys you. Chronic cortisol elevation suppresses immune function. It reduces lymphocyte production. It impairs the ability of natural killer cells to identify and destroy compromised cells. It increases visceral fat deposition. It degrades hippocampal neurons, physically shrinking the brain region responsible for memory consolidation. It disrupts the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, suppressing reproductive hormones. It accelerates bone density loss. It impairs collagen synthesis, which means your skin ages faster, your connective tissue weakens, your wound healing slows. Chronic cortisol elevation is not stress. It is systemic degradation on a timer. Now here's the data. In 2015, Gaetan Chevalier published a study in the journal Psychological Reports, measuring cortisol levels in subjects who were grounded to the Earth's surface versus sham-grounded controls. Subjects slept on grounding pads connected to the Earth's electrical surface through a ground rod. The controls slept on identical pads that were not actually connected. Nobody knew which group they were in. Salivary cortisol was measured at multiple points across the circadian cycle. The grounded subjects did not just have lower cortisol. They had better shaped cortisol curves. Cortisol is supposed to follow a specific daily rhythm. High in the morning, a spike that wakes you up, then a gradual decline through the day, reaching its lowest point around midnight. This is called the circadian cortisol rhythm, and it is one of the most important signals your endocrine system produces. In chronically stressed individuals, this curve flattens. Morning cortisol does not spike enough. Nighttime cortisol does not drop enough. The signal degrades, and the grounded subjects showed normalization of this curve. The morning peak sharpened, the nighttime trough deepened, the rhythm restored itself. Not with medication, with electrons. Comment below if you knew your stress hormones follow a daily rhythm, and that the shape of that rhythm matters more than the absolute level. Because this is the thing most stress conversations completely miss. Now, connect this to sleep. Cortisol and melatonin are antagonists. They operate on a seesaw. When cortisol rises, melatonin suppression follows. When cortisol falls in the evening, melatonin rises and sleep onset begins. If your cortisol is not dropping properly at night, your melatonin signal is blunted. You lie in bed. You are tired. But the chemical gate that opens sleep is only half open. You fall asleep later. You wake more often. And your slow wave sleep, the deep restorative stage where growth hormone is released and memory consolidation occurs, gets compressed. The same grounding studies measured sleep quality. Subjects reported faster sleep onset, fewer nighttime awakenings, and feeling more rested in the morning. And these were not subjective reports alone. In follow-up work, researchers measured heart rate variability, a proxy for autonomic nervous system balance, and found that grounded subjects showed increased parasympathetic tone. The rest and digest branch of the nervous system was being upregulated. The fight or flight branch was being dampened. During sleep, through the ground, subscribe, because this is not wellness content. This is physics, endocrinology, and neuroscience applied to something you can do tomorrow morning for free. And if you think this is just about stress and sleep, you have not heard what happens to inflammation. In 2010, a pilot study published by Oshman, Chevalier, and Brown measured inflammatory markers in subjects following grounding. They used thermal imaging to visualize inflammation, tracking surface temperature changes in areas of known injury, and documented measurable reductions in the classic signs of inflammation: redness, heat, swelling, and pain. In a companion study, they measured C-reactive protein, a blood marker of systemic inflammation produced by the liver in response to inflammatory cytokines. Levels decreased. And this matters more than you think it does. Chronic low-grade inflammation is not a single disease. It is the common upstream driver of almost every disease that kills people in industrialized nations. Cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, certain cancers, autoimmune conditions, depression. The medical literature has spent the last 2 decades documenting how chronic inflammation is the thread connecting metabolic syndrome, neurodegeneration, and immune dysfunction. And the argument being made in the grounding literature, supported by an increasing body of peer-reviewed data, is that one contributing factor to the epidemic of chronic inflammation is electrical. We disconnected ourselves from the electron reservoir of the Earth's surface. We insulated our bodies from a charge source they had continuous access to for the entirety of human evolution. And the inflammatory balance shifted. Like and share this video. I mean it. The fact that this research exists and almost nobody knows about it is the whole reason I make these videos. Let me tell you about a study from 2023 that pulled multiple threads together. A meta-analysis published in the journal Bioelectricity reviewed the accumulated grounding research and found statistically significant effects across multiple physiological measures. White blood cell count decreased, red blood cell electrodynamics improved, heart rate variability increased, cortisol rhythms normalized, pain markers decreased, mood scores improved. And these were not isolated findings from a single lab. They were consistent patterns across multiple research groups using different protocols in different countries. Now, I want to address something directly. If you are sitting there thinking this sounds too simple, that touching grass cannot actually do all of this, I want you to notice what your skepticism is actually directed at. You are not skeptical of the physics. Electron transfer is real. Molecular diffusion is real. Olfactory signaling is real. Cortisol is real. You are skeptical that something free and simple could have a meaningful physiological effect. And that skepticism is not scientific, it is cultural. We have been trained to believe that anything that works must be complicated, expensive, or require a prescription. The physics does not care what you believe about it. Electrons do not require your confidence to flow. Comment if that just reframed something for you. Tell me what shifted. Now I need to take you somewhere unexpected. Because everything I have told you so far is about what grass does to your body. I have not told you what grass actually is. And when I do, when I explain the evolutionary history of grass and why it exists at all, it will change how you look at every field and lawn and meadow for the rest of your life. Subscribe, because this next section involves a 66 million year old catastrophe, an evolutionary strategy that no other plant family has ever matched. And the reason grass conquered 40% of the Earth's land surface while trees could not. And I have not even told you about the microbiome data or the Barefoot studies on children, or what happens to your prefrontal cortex after 20 minutes on soil. We are halfway through and the deepest science is still coming. Let me start with an extinction. 66 million years ago, an asteroid roughly 10 kilometers in diameter struck what is now the Yucatan Peninsula at approximately 20 kilometers per second. The impact released energy equivalent to roughly 10 billion Hiroshima bombs. It punched a crater 180 kilometers across. It vaporized rock. It launched molten ejecta into the upper atmosphere on ballistic trajectories that re-entered around the globe, heating the atmosphere to oven temperatures. It triggered earthquakes at magnitude 11 or higher. Tsunamis hundreds of meters tall swept across entire ocean basins, and it injected so much dust and sulfur aerosol into the stratosphere that photosynthesis effectively shut down across the planet for months to years. The Chicxulub impact killed roughly 76% of all species on Earth. Every non-avian dinosaur, gone. Most large-bodied animals, gone. And the forests. The dense canopy forests that had covered much of the land surface for over 100 million years. Devastated. The fossil record shows it clearly. In the layers of rock just above the impact boundary, the ratio of fern spores to tree pollen spikes dramatically. This is called the fern spike, and paleobotanists recognize it as the signature of ecological collapse. Ferns are colonizers. They move in when everything else has been destroyed. The forests were gone, the canopy was gone, and for the first time in over 100 million years, sunlight was hitting the ground across vast stretches of the planet with nothing tall enough to block it. And this is when grasses made their move. Grasses had existed before the asteroid. The oldest confirmed grass fossils date to the late Cretaceous, around 70 million years ago. But they were minor players. Understory species. Small, marginal, irrelevant in a world dominated by towering conifers and ferns and cycads. The impact changed the rules. And grasses had an adaptation that no forest tree could match. Comment below with your guess. What adaptation could a small, marginal ground plant possibly have that would let it dominate a post-apocalyptic landscape where forests could not recover? The answer is architectural, and it is brilliant. Trees grow from their tips. The apical meristem, the dividing tissue that produces new growth, sits at the top of the tree, at the end of every branch, at the crown, which means that if you destroy the top of a tree, you destroy its growth engine. Fire, wind, an animal eating it, a catastrophic impact, winter killing its canopy. The growth point is gone, and the tree must rebuild from dormant buds if it can, a slow and energetically expensive process. Grasses grow from their base. The meristem, the dividing tissue, is at the bottom of the blade, right at ground level or even below it, protected by the soil itself. You can cut a grass blade off entirely, you can burn it to the ground, an animal can eat it down to the dirt, and the meristem is untouched. Growth resumes immediately. No rebuilding, no dormant bud activation, the engine never stopped. This is called basal meristem architecture, and it is the single most important reason grass covers 40% of the Earth's land surface today. Not because grass is strong, because grass is unkillable in a way that trees are not. Fire sweeps through a savanna, and every tree in its path must regrow from protected buds or die. The grass is growing back before the smoke clears. An herbivore strips the canopy of a forest, and the trees are set back years. A herd of bison eats a prairie to the soil line, and the grass is taller in 2 weeks. After Chicxulub, the forests could not come back fast enough. The grasses could, and once they established, they changed the rules permanently. Grasslands burn. They burn regularly, naturally, ignited by lightning. And because grass grows from the base, fire does not destroy grasslands. Fire maintains them. Fire kills tree seedlings trying to establish in the grassland. Seedlings that grow from their tips. Seedlings whose meristems are exposed and vulnerable. But it does not kill the grass. Grasses evolved to burn. Some species will not even germinate without fire. The grassland maintains itself through a feedback loop. Grass grows, grass dries, lightning strikes. Fire kills everything that is not grass. Grass regrows. The system is self-reinforcing. And this is the surface you are putting your bare feet on. An organism that survived a planetary extinction event. A growth architecture so resilient it turned fire into an ally. A ground cover so successful it spread across every continent except Antarctica and became the foundation of every grazing ecosystem, every agricultural civilization, every field of wheat and rice and corn that feeds 8 billion people today. Subscribe right now if you're enjoying the value in this lecture, because every single thing I just told you about grass was free. And every single thing I am about to tell you about what grass does to the developing human immune system, to the prefrontal cortex, to the microbiome of a child who plays in it versus one who does not, will be free too. Let me tell you about children, because what I am about to describe is one of the most important studies in modern immunology, and it was conducted in daycare centers. In 2020, a research team in Finland, led by Marja Roslund at the University of Helsinki, published a study that should have made international headlines. It did not. Here is what they did. They took children at standard urban daycare centers, concrete yards, synthetic turf, gravel, the usual sterile play surfaces, and they replaced sections of the outdoor play area with forest floor. Not a park, forest floor. Soil, grass, native ground cover plants, planter boxes filled with dirt that children were encouraged to dig in, play in, handle daily. They ran the intervention for 28 days. They took blood and stool samples from the children before and after, and they ran the same tests on control groups at daycare centers where no changes were made. After 28 days, the children playing on grass and soil showed measurable changes in their immune profiles. The diversity of their skin and gut microbiomes had increased. Their ratio of anti-inflammatory cytokines to pro-inflammatory cytokines had shifted. Specifically, the ratio of interleukin 10 to interleukin 17 moved in a direction consistent with improved immune regulation. Interleukin 10 is an anti-inflammatory signaling molecule. It tells the immune system to stand down when there is no real threat. Interleukin 17 is a pro-inflammatory signal that drives the aggressive immune responses associated with autoimmune conditions. The children who played on grass and soil had more interleukin 10 and less interleukin 17. Their immune systems were being recalibrated toward tolerance. In 28 days, by playing in dirt and grass, the control group showed no change. Think about what this means. We've spent a generation building sterile play environments for children. Rubber mats, sealed surfaces, antibacterial everything. We did this to protect them, and the immunological data suggests we may have been doing the opposite. We removed the microbial inputs their immune systems were expecting, the inputs those systems evolved to receive during development, and the immune system responded by losing its calibration, overreacting to harmless proteins, attacking the body's own tissues, the explosion of childhood allergies, eczema, asthma, type 1 diabetes, and autoimmune conditions in industrialized nations over the last 50 years maps directly onto the timeline of removing children from contact with soil and grass and environmental microbes. Comment below if you played outside as a kid in actual dirt, on actual grass, and tell me whether your own children or the children you see today have the same kind of access to the ground that you did, because the immunological data suggests this matters more than we ever understood. Now let me talk about your brain, not your immune system, not your blood, your actual brain. In 2019, a study published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences by Peter Aspinall and colleagues used mobile electroencephalography to measure real-time brain activity in people walking through different environments. Subjects wore portable EEG caps that recorded electrical activity across multiple brain regions as they moved through commercial streets, residential areas, and green spaces, including grass parkland. When subjects entered green space, the EEG data showed measurable changes in two specific regions. The prefrontal cortex, the brain region directly behind your forehead, responsible for executive function, working memory, attention regulation, and decision-making, showed decreased high-frequency beta activity. High beta is associated with active analytical thinking, anxiety, and cognitive load. It is the signal of a brain working hard, and it dropped. Simultaneously, the EEG recorded increased low-frequency theta activity in the same region. Theta waves are associated with a state neuroscientists call soft fascination, an attentive but relaxed cognitive mode. The brain is not shutting down, it is not zoning out, it is running in a different mode, a mode associated with creative problem solving, emotional regulation, and what the researchers described as effortless attention. And this was not after an hour of meditation. This was walking across grass in a park. The brain state shift was detectable within minutes of entering the green space, and it persisted for the duration of the exposure. The theoretical framework for this comes from attention restoration theory, developed by Rachel and Stephen Kaplan at the University of Michigan in the 1980s. Their argument, supported now by decades of data from multiple labs, is that the human attentional system has two modes: directed attention, which requires effort and is used for tasks that demand focus; reading, calculating, navigating traffic, processing information; and involuntary attention, which is drawn automatically by stimuli that are interesting but not demanding. Natural environments, grass, trees, moving water, birdsong, engage involuntary attention. They hold the mind without taxing it. And while involuntary attention is engaged, the directed attention system recovers. It replenishes. The neural resources that were depleted by hours of concentrated work or screen time are restored by minutes in an environment that asks nothing of the prefrontal cortex, but offers it enough to stay gently engaged. This is why you feel different after being outside. Not because of fresh air, that phrase is scientifically meaningless. Because your prefrontal cortex switched modes. Because your brain shifted from high beta directed attention to theta dominant soft fascination, and the cognitive fatigue you had been accumulating all day began to reverse. Comment if you have ever solved a problem while walking outside that you could not solve sitting at your desk. That was not coincidence. That was your prefrontal cortex entering a restoration state that permitted the default mode network to make connections your directed attention was too rigid to find. Now I want to bring all of this together because you have been hearing about these systems one at a time. Grounding, microbial exposure, volatile organic compounds, cortisol regulation, immune recalibration, prefrontal restoration. And it would be easy to think these are separate phenomena that happen to occur in the same location. They are not. They are layered, they are simultaneous, and they are interactive. When cortisol drops, immune function improves. When immune inflammation decreases, neural inflammation decreases with it. When prefrontal fatigue is restored, emotional regulation improves, which reduces psychological stress, which further reduces cortisol. When the microbiome diversifies, the gut-brain axis signals change, serotonin precursor production shifts, mood stabilizes, sleep improves. When sleep improves, cortisol rhythms normalize further. When blood viscosity decreases from improved zeta potential, oxygen delivery to every tissue in the body becomes more efficient, including to the brain, including to the prefrontal cortex. These systems are not parallel, they are recursive. Each one feeds into the others. The grounding improves the blood. The blood improves oxygen delivery. The oxygen improves brain function. The brain function improves stress regulation. The stress regulation improves immune function. The immune function improves inflammatory balance. The inflammatory balance improves gut signaling. The gut signaling improves mood. The mood improves sleep. And the sleep improves everything. And the entry point, the trigger for the entire cascade is your bare skin on grass. Like and share this video with every person you know who is struggling with stress, sleep, inflammation, brain fog, or just the general feeling that something is wrong and they cannot name it. Because something might be wrong. They might be electrically disconnected from the surface of the planet their body was designed to touch. Now let me tell you something about time, because there is a number that matters here, and almost no study bothers to highlight it. 20 minutes. Across the grounding literature, across the cortisol studies, across the attention restoration data, Across the volatile organic compound exposure research, 20 minutes is the threshold that keeps appearing. 20 minutes of barefoot ground contact produces measurable cortisol changes. 20 minutes of green space exposure produces measurable EEG changes. 20 minutes is enough time for molecular diffusion of soil-derived compounds to begin interacting with the immune system through the skin. 20 minutes is roughly the time required for the grounding-induced zeta potential shift in red blood cells to become detectable under microscopy. Not an hour, not a weekend retreat, not a 2-week vacation, 20 minutes, every day, on the ground, without shoes. You spend 20 minutes doing things every day that give you nothing. Scrolling, waiting, sitting in a car at a stoplight. What if you reallocated 20 minutes of dead time to standing on grass? Not because someone told you to go outside and touch grass as a joke, because the physics demands it. Because your body is an electrical system that has been disconnected from its charge source. Because your immune system is waiting for microbial inputs it has not received. Because your prefrontal cortex is running in a mode it was never designed to sustain for 16 hours straight. Comment one thing you are going to change tomorrow based on what you just heard. I want to read it. I want to know what landed. Here's the part that stays with me. We think of grass as ordinary. We think of it as the default ground cover, the thing that grows where nothing important is happening. But grass is a 66 million year survivor, an organism whose growth architecture made it unkillable by fire, by grazing, by catastrophic extinction. It conquered 40% of the terrestrial surface of this planet, not through strength, but through a structural decision about where to place its most vital tissue. At the base, below the damage, below the fire, below the teeth. And every blade of that grass is doing what every tree does, but faster, on a tighter cycle, closer to the ground where you actually live. Pulling carbon from the air, building structure from starlight, feeding carbon into a soil microbiome so dense that a teaspoon of it outpopulates the entire human species. Releasing volatile molecules into the air that alter your neurochemistry through a sensory pathway that bypasses conscious thought. Hosting soil bacteria whose cell wall lipids interact with your serotonin system through mechanisms published in peer-reviewed immunology journals. The ground is not inert. It is not decoration. It is the most biologically active surface you will ever stand on. And every minute you spend on it with bare skin, you are participating in a set of physics and biology that has been running continuously for hundreds of millions of years. A system that does not know or care that you have a mortgage and a phone and a schedule. It just runs. Electrons flow, molecules diffuse, microbes transfer, cortisol drops, cells respond. You touched grass once. You stepped on it and kept walking and you thought it was nothing. It was not nothing. It was never nothing. You just didn't know what was happening because nobody explained the physics. Subscribe if this changed something for you. If you're going to walk outside tomorrow morning and feel the ground differently because you now know what is actually under your feet and what it is actually doing to every system in your body. This channel exists to make you see the ordinary world for what it really is. Extraordinary, measurable, and waiting for you to pay attention. Go touch grass. Not because the internet told you to, because the physics is on your side.